Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is DreamFiction and today we will be reading the story Issei, the True Dragon of the Apocalypse, translated into English by Jyanzein. Azazel watched the night sky with utmost tranquility until he caught how a violet magic circle appeared behind him. They're finally here, Azazel thought aloud as he watched the appearance of Issei and his two future lovers. And the others? Issei asked instantly, seeing that Ria's and her peerage were not there, not even Serzich's. Serzich's is entertaining them in hell, was Azazel's simple reply. This is a meeting that does not need their presences. They would only bother with questions. I sensed the presence of three very strong angels inside. Penemu commented, fixing her gaze on Azazel. So they didn't take a second to come, huh? After hearing Penemu's words, Issei couldn't help but remember what they talked about in the past about a very important prophecy. I am aware that Tiamat knows nothing about this. Azazel commented, causing the dragoness to glare at him. But, as one of the three most powerful entities, I see it interesting that you find out about this. Azazel raised a hand towards the door, inviting them in. Shall we go? Meanwhile, in the underworld. Are you okay with this, brother? Riaz asked, receiving an exhausted look from the Mao. There's nothing to be done. We tried to delay the inevitable, but it was more than obvious that at any moment they were going to look for it. Serzich's commented, implying that he had no regrets. Besides, on second thought, we still have plenty of time to accomplish our task. Now that he'll know about the prophecy, it only remains for us to be a bit more prudent with our movements so as not to be so obvious. Serzich's fixed his gaze on his sister, making her a little nervous. That's a part of your mission. Speaking of which, since we're here, it would be great to go over the points of our plan again. The Mao stated, positioning both hands on the desk as he looked around at everyone present. Returning to the Kuo Academy. Issei entered through the main doors of the club, slightly widening his eyes in disbelief as he witnessed three people who glowed in a divine and incomprehensible way. They had an impressive aura around them that came to impose a bit but at the same time embraced you gently. Simply put, it was a strange but pleasant sensation. There were three entities. In the center stood a man with the strongest aura of the three, so it made him seem like the leader. His light blue eyes gave him a compassionate and friendly look. He had a look of being a good guy, as well as perhaps the most beautiful I had seen so far due to his perfect and refined features. At his side, there was a man with golden hair and eye color just like the previous one. Unlike his apparent leader, this one had a somewhat dismayed expression, looking back and forth as if he were a child in a toy store. The man fixed his gaze on Issei, giving him a huge toothy grin that made him feel a little weird. It was only natural, considering this guy seemed rather strange. And on his other side, it was unbelievable, a woman who was almost as tall as the guy in the center. She was extremely similar to their apparent leader. The only thing that set him apart was his completely innocent look, which was only intensified by his tender aura. When she saw Issei, she gave him a cute smile, even though they were natural enemies. Another obvious difference was that she was a woman, and a rather well-endowed woman at that. Somehow, she rivaled Penemu when it came to breast size. In fact, Issei could tell with great ease that this woman was the perfect counterpart to the cadre. The woman averted her gaze from Issei for a short second, fixing it on her side. Penemu, Azazel. Long time no see. I really miss you guys. The woman commented in an angelic and utterly pure voice, indicating that every word was more than sincere. Penemu simply responded with a wave by raising her hand, causing Issei to reinforce the idea that this woman was the perfect counterpart to the cadre. Still, Issei didn't have much more time to think about that as she watched Azazel practically crawl over to the woman, making a bouquet of flowers appear from a magic circle. "Oh, beautiful Gabriel," he exclaimed, taking one of her hands and kissing it without her consent. "I've been waiting for you all these years." "Gabriel?" Wait, Issei thought, blinking at the revelation and fixing his gaze on Penemu, where she answered him with a nod, confirming his doubts. Any woman would respond with disgust at such an act, but Gabriel, being Gabriel, it was simply impossible for him to take Azazel's hint towards her. She only acted out of her innocence as she reached down and stroked his hair with her tender smile on her face. "I've missed you all these years too," she exclaimed with complete innocence and sincerity. "Without you, Elysium has been very boring." This alone caused Azazel to hug her tightly, in which the Seraphim did not hesitate to return the gesture. "Elysium?" Issei wondered aloud. "It's known as heaven or paradise to humans." Penemu replied, receiving a nod from Issei. "Gabriel is one of the most beautiful and pure women in the whole world," Tiamat commented, seeing Azazel's reaction. "She is the main reason hundreds of angels have fallen." The dragoness fixed her gaze on Penemu. "She, and you." Seeing that Issei wanted to find an answer, Penemu positioned a hand on his head affectionately. "When I was in heaven, she and I were identical. We differed only in hair and eye color, along with my height." After that, with respect to personality, tastes, thoughts we were alike in every respect. Gabriel looked up, giving Penemu a nice smile as she continued to comfort Azazel. That made us very good friends back then. Issei looked at Penemu and Gabriel for a short second, unable to believe what he had heard. Can the fall of an angel really change your life that much? He couldn't help but think, as the two were now complete opposites. Michael could only smile nervously at Azazel's attitude, sharing the look with his companion. A few seconds later. Everyone seemed to have calmed down, so the angels decided to introduce themselves to Issei, who still didn't seem entirely clear on who they were. My name is Michael. I've been in charge of Elysium since the death of my father, God. Michael pointed to the woman beside him. As you know, this is Gabriel. Along with me, she is a seraphim, one of the strongest in her position. Michael pointed to his other side, causing the as yet unidentified man to raise his hand as a gesture of greeting. He is Dulio Gesualdo. An ancient exorcist who was reincarnated as an angel thousands of years ago. Despite having been a human, his combat strength is on par with ours. He was also known to be my Joker until he became independent because of his great power. Joker? Thought Issei for a short second, then remembered one of the first talks he had with Ddraig. That's the first example I've seen of a reincarnation other than by demons. Already once introduced, I would like to tell you the reason for our visit. Hearing this, Issei couldn't help but look at the Heavens leader with special attention. Seeing Issei's reaction, Michael became serious for the first time in the talk. Apparently, you already have a bit of an idea about this. Penemu had talked to me a little, he commented, causing everyone without exception to look at the aforementioned with great surprise. Azazel held up his end of the bargain. Commented the cadre quickly, seeing certain disappointed looks beginning to be directed towards him. He never commented on it. It was our own father who told me about the prophecy just before his last battle. Penemu couldn't help but lower his gaze with some sadness after remembering it. Hearing the answer, Michael and the others seemed to be instantly satisfied. Very well. It is only natural that our father told the prophecy to the one who would previously be his successor. Michael's comment took Issei by complete surprise, as he knew nothing about it. Why was Penemu supposed to have been his successor? Changing the theme, it's obvious that they must not have all the information we have about her. That's why we came to take Issei with us. Hearing this, Tiamat became defensive practically instantly. What are they going to do? The dragoness asked, stepping forward. I didn't think the rumors of the alliance between the Ice Queen and the Securiute were true because of their eternal rivalry. But the impossible means nothing these days. Michael commented, handing her a small smile. Don't worry, we promise nothing will happen to him. Besides, it'll only take a few minutes. Tiamat took a step back, crossing her arms. Very well. Are you sure? Issei consulted the dragoness as he saw that her always hostility seemed to be practically in short supply at the moment. Tiamat watched Issei with a small smile denoting her beautiful fangs. Don't worry. Angels can't lie. She explained, resting a hand on Issei's hair and rubbing it affectionately. Well, as you may know, protocols prevent us from bringing any demons, humans, fallen angels, or any other species to Elysium. Michael ducked his head, along with the other two. I hope you know how to excuse us. No problem. Was Azazel's simple reply as he wiped his ear with his pinky finger and did his best not to look at Gabriel. Wait a minute. Issei pointed at himself. I am a demon. You're the exception. Hearing Dulio's reply, Issei could only look at him with great intrigue. You'll understand in the moment. Michael explained, holding out his hand. Let's go. Issei looked towards his two future lovers who were quick to nod, as was Azazel. Finally, he took the seraphim's hand, causing the aforementioned to widen his smile. Gabriel, if you want you can stay until we return. He quickly replied, causing the pout on Gabriel's face to instantly disappear into a huge grin. What? Dulio exclaimed. Wait, I want to stay for a while too. He pleaded, causing Michael to grab his hand. You're coming with us. Was Michael's simple answer, making Dulio do his best to wriggle free while comical tears appeared on his face. Followed by that, a strong golden light adorned the club for a short second, and when it disappeared, 3 people were already missing there. Sis, I missed you so much. Gabriel practically pounced on Penemu, hugging her very tightly. Oh, yes, were the only words out of the cadre's mouth as she felt herself being squeezed and squished by her best friend from the past. Meanwhile, in a rather singular place, to say the least. After the blinding brightness, Issei opened his eyes and couldn't help but be immensely surprised by what he was seeing. Everything was completely white. He was standing on top of some clouds, or at least, they appeared to be. The solidity was so empty that it looked like he was floating above the ground, as if he wasn't actually stepping on anything. What appeared to be clouds stretched out infinitely, where different structures made by walls with a golden glow could be seen, in what were supposed to be the homes of the beings that inhabited there. The atmosphere, unlike hell, shared much similarity to the mortal plane, as far as color was concerned. The only strange thing was that there was no hint of clouds around, though perhaps it wasn't so strange, as they seemed to be stepping directly into the clouds. Next to him, Issei could make out how there was a small gap, and in that place, an infinite fall seemed to be visible, as it was completely dark underneath. There seemed to be nothing below, except for a wall of golden magic circles covering the entire surface below. It was probably to keep the huge structure floating, and perhaps for yet another function. Issei stopped admiring the entire environment when he felt Michael position a hand on his shoulder. "It's nothing like what you've been seeing so far, is it?" the seraphim asked, receiving a quick nod from Issei. "Follow me." Issei instantly heeded, following behind him, while Dulio watched him endlessly. The magic circles below were created by God. It's what keeps this realm afloat and also serves as the passage to earth for those who gave in to sin. Michael explained, as Issei watched as each angel seemed to be enjoying life here. "These clouds were also created by my father. If you have impure desires that begin to adorn your heart, your body will feel heavier and heavier until these clouds can no longer support your weight and eventually, you fall. Because of the magical density of the atmosphere, it is impossible to fly." Michael paused there, fixing his gaze on Issei with great curiosity. "However, I really expected to have to use a special magic circle to allow you to move around here, but I see that it wasn't necessary. It's a very intriguing thing, being that you're a demon." Dulio landed next to Issei, causing him to startle a little. "Does that mean the demonic corruption's disappearance is official?" he asked, bringing a hand to his chin. "There are rumors that because of the death of God and the Demon King, the forces of the divine and the corrupt has greatly decayed." "Actually, demonic corruption does still exist, as does original sin," Issei quickly explained, rubbing his hair with a nervous smile at the angel's very casual attitude. "What happens is that I'm lucky enough to have Ddraig, who prevented my soul from being corrupted after reincarnation." "I see," Dulio commented, moving a little closer to Issei, piercing him with his gaze. "That I never would have guessed." A dangerous gleam ran through his eyes. "And tell me, how has mankind advanced? Are the girls of today prettier than the girls of yesteryear?" Well, Issei looked genuinely taken aback at the sudden question. Let's just say that makeup products help a little. He didn't know how to continue the conversation. "Dulio, didn't you have to do something?" Michael asked, causing the aforementioned to turn away from Issei immediately. "That's right." Dulio smashed his fist into his palm. "I have to keep an eye on the second bubble of human souls." He commented to no one in particular, disappearing in a jiffy, without first giving a quick salute. "Sorry." Michael bowed his head to deliver his apology, impressing Issei. "As you may know, he is not an angel as such. He has great curiosity for human life since he left it, and let's just say that when he was an exorcist, he had a great interest towards beauty, especially the beauty of women. An interest that has not yet disappeared today." "No problem, really." Issei quickly waved his hands, feeling slightly uncomfortable that the leader of the angels bowed his head to him. They both continued walking for a few seconds, where Michael presented him with a kind of giant capsule, where there were a large number of human souls living together. He explained that this is the supposed paradise mentioned in the Bible, and that is where all pure and kind souls end up. He also explained that before God's death, evil or corroded souls had their memories erased and were introduced into another new body. At least, it was like that until God's death, now they were simply destroyed. Issei was left wondering what was the cause of changing the system, but he kept the question to himself, feeling that the doubt would be answered in a very short time. Finally, they parked at a small home, which happened to be the home of the god himself. It was curious, as all the home structures were exactly identical, except for the structures that stored the pure human souls. When he entered, the first thing he distinguished was a small golden structure, where too many things seemed to be regulated. This machine was used by God to create angels, human souls, clean those souls, create sacred gears, and among other very important things. Commented the seraphim, lowering his head with slight sadness. Unfortunately, no one in Elysium possesses that much power to use the projector. That is why the creation of angels stagnated, and for that reason is why we are only left with destroying the evil souls of humans. Well, we can only pray that they continue to reproduce smoothly, so that they will continue to subsist organically. It is curious to see that this very small element has wiped out infinitely powerful beings, such as myself and Albion. Ddraig commented, a bit impressed at the fact. "We didn't wipe them out. We simply sealed them," corrected Michael, not detracting from the great power of the dragons. Something that obviously made Ddraig happy and made like him a little. Michael opened one of the doors, fixing his gaze on Issei. "Anyway, this wasn't what I wanted to show you." He gave a small nod of his head, indicating for him to follow. Issei did so, arriving at a rather small room, where a rather small white and gold-colored structure stood in the center, where it possessed different strange symbols in the center, at the same time it had Hebrew writing on the top. What distinguished our father was not his immense power, but his skill. The seraphim narrowed his eyes slightly. He was able to see the future. Hearing this, Issei froze completely still. See the future? That's right. Michael nodded. For that reason, he would make various prophecies of what the future might be like. And, if so, how to change it. Or at least, how we could make a safe change. After all, playing with the future can be quite dangerous. Michael positioned himself next to what appeared to be a small relic, positioning his hand over the writing. The prophecy of the apocalypse he uttered, causing Issei to widen his eyes in shock. A dystopian future, where only the end awaits the demons and the fallen angels. The angels, Norse, and yokai will suffer the worst cataclysm in their history. 3,000 years remain, so that the life of every living being is at stake. Issei tried to interrupt, but Michael stopped him instantly. The symbols belong to each faction, and the order is indicated by the importance of each in the last battle. Michael started with the last ones. These are us, the angels. Of the approximate 40,000 of us now, an estimated 2036 are estimated to survive. Michael passed his hand over the next symbol. These are the fallen angels. Of the approximate 35,000, an estimated 2 are estimated to survive. He paused at the next circle, looking at it with great attention. These are the Nordics. Of the 20,000, 15,000 will survive. Keep in mind that today, the Norse army only numbers 8,000, and the rest are citizens. Michael went on to the next circle, frowning slightly. In this case, it is not the involvement of a faction, but of an entity. This is the Hacker Yuiku, where their survival is an unknown, as are the other singular entities. Michael continued, parking his hand on the other circle, unable to keep from squinting his eyes. Surprisingly, the demons have an even larger share. But, the total number of survivors is 0. Hearing the figure, Issei felt himself freeze. The third belongs to Office, and the second to Great Red. I don't understand, Issei commented. Why are you telling me something so important? Michael positioned his hand over the last symbol. Because you are the most important in this battle, Issei. The Securite, you are the one who will decide the future. Issei was completely stymied, trying to absorb all the newly collected information. He would have to bear the burden of saving everyone. Was this some kind of joke? But, don't take it so personally. Michael exclaimed, seeing that Issei didn't seem to respond to such information. The prophecy indicates the beginning of the end in 3,000 years. 1,000 have already passed, so there are still 2,000 years left. Furthermore, it is also specified below that he will be the last Securite in existence, so you need not worry. The last Securite? Issei couldn't help but ask, receiving a quick nod from Michael. We don't know how it will happen, but we are sure that the bearer will have to sacrifice himself along with Ddraig to succeed, or at least, we speculate something along those lines. Something that should destroy the boosted gear completely and take Draig's soul with it. Seeing Issei begin to fill with melancholy, the seraphim quickly reached over and positioned a hand on his shoulder. You need not worry. The average lifespan of an Albion or Ddraig bearer is equivalent to the lifespan of a human warrior due to the great battles they lead. To be honest, I don't think you should face such a responsibility, as there is still a long time to go. I brought you here because I think the chances of you getting to face it are very low, but they are there. I know it maybe sounds very discouraging that it's killing you so fast, but it's statistics. Statistics were born to be broken. Was Ddraig's simple reply, impressing Michael immensely, as he hadn't expected the dragon to jump to support practically instantly. The dragon hoped that his words might have made Issei happy, but he grew bitter and worried as he felt nothing change inside his body. Before you return, I must show you one last thing. A door opened, causing Issei to turn his drooping gaze there. Behind that door, there is a message from my father that is addressed only to the Securite. None of us have ever entered there, as we are not allowed to do so. We do not know what the message is, nor do we have any clue, as all previous bearers could not understand the meaning behind it, although some didn't even try, due to the confidence they had in their power. Michael fixed his gaze on Issei with great seriousness. That you didn't need a magic circle to be transported here speaks a lot about you. I think you are the most indicated bearer to see this message so far, and perhaps you can find some meaning. Issei looked at Michael for a short second, then nodded. Perhaps, there he might find some answer as to how to prevent the death of many. Before you go in, I want to tell you one thing. Issei stood in the doorway, fixing his gaze on Michael. My father's prophecies do not decipher destiny, only the future. That is why, depending on how such a prophecy is taken, the future can fluctuate. How many times has it fluctuated? Issei asked, causing Michael to become slightly sobered after remembering the one antecedent. "It was only once," was the angel's simple reply. Issei entered the room noticeably larger than the previous ones, where one could see that it was a type of living room with many chairs and a large round table in the center. Issei just walked a little to the side, looking around the room in detail without being able to find anything interesting. Finally, his gaze was fixed on a kind of orographic player in the center of the table, which gave off a figure of a man who looked to be around 38 years old, already with a couple of gray hairs and a golden beard. His golden eyes stared into nothingness while he appeared to be very hesitant. "Well, let's get this started." God closed his eyes for a short second, looking out the nearby window. "This is a projection, so I won't be able to answer any questions. Just deign to listen, please." Issei just leaned against the wall, listening intently to the projection. "Today is probably the last day of my life. I saw the future and shared my wisdom and destiny with all the other people on how to stop Cherishing. We just needed to appease her anger to bring her back to her senses, her one weakness." God lowered his head, heaving a great sigh. "I never thought my own children would use that information against us just for wanting to extinguish all other species to predominate. My son the Demon King, how could I have been so blind?" God looked up, giving a small sigh. "Well, there's nothing to do now." God lowered his head slowly. "The future has fluctuated and there is only one way to stop Cherishing. Unfortunately, I will have to sacrifice myself." God looked up, narrowing his eyes slightly. "But it will only be for momentary peace. I have seen who the Securite is, I have chosen him myself after seeing his provenance. Still, I'd rather not specify. I will not make the same mistake twice." God walked over to the window and looked outward. A small smile appeared on his face. Apparently, he was looking at his sons. "In closing, I would like to tell you one thing. If you are the chosen Securite." God narrowed his gaze again. "There are only two beings who know about your identity, and only those two people will help you at the key moment. I put all my faith in them, and from the future I am glimpsing, I believe I was not mistaken." God lightly clenched his fists behind his back. "I worry that there will be another fluctuation, but I also have faith that everything will go as planned." God gave a big sigh, closing his eyes deeply. "I know you won't understand this at the moment. But, to be honest, the only thing I hope for in this projection, the only thing I hope, is that you can forgive me." Issei could only widen his eyes slightly when God turned around and seemed to fix his gaze on him just before the projection ended. A very curious thing, since it was just that. A projection. After a few minutes, Michael quickly approached Issei, seeing that he had finally come out. From the look on his face, he knew he had been debating the information quite a bit. "Did you understand something?" Michael asked, causing Issei to grimace slightly. "I only understood that if I am the Securite, I should know two people who know everything about the future," was Issei's reply, causing Michael to make a small grimace, indicating that he had already been told that. Also, during the screening he seemed to be very hurt by the betrayal of his son, the Demon King. "That's normal," was Michael's quick reply. "The betrayal came from the beginning of the Great Holy War, when the demons wanted to proclaim themselves the sole dominant species. But during the battle against the Cherishing, the differences had been put aside." Issei's comment made Michael look at him with great intrigue. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I mean that he seemed sad about something recent." That answer made Michael slightly surprised. "Although, I don't know specifically what he meant. He doesn't specify." Michael lowered his gaze, thinking carefully about his words. "I see." He raised his gaze, staring at him. "But, I think it's kind of absurd what you're bringing up, since the Demon King himself was the one who brought great help to God, along with Office and Great Red to seal Cherishing. In fact, he died along with God to accomplish the task. It's only a hypothesis. After all, it's what I thought I saw." It was Issei's simple comment, causing Michael not to press further, due to the fact that he looked quite depressed with all the recently undermined information. Michael decided to put the questioning aside, seeing that Issei didn't seem to be doing too well. "Do you want to take some time to absorb everything?" he asked, receiving a nod from Issei. "Let's go somewhere quiet." Meanwhile, back at Kuo Academy. "So, the probabilities of a chaotic future are closer than we thought," Tiamat commented, already having been informed of the situation. "It's still 2,000 years away. We can still prepare and train him without problems." Penemu commented, receiving a quick nod from Tiamat. "But, it will be 2,000 years from now." They all looked at Gabriel, not understanding exactly what he meant. "I mean, the average lifespan of a Securite is no more than 30. He will most likely. He won't die." Tiamat and Penemu stomped loudly, sounding their words with great imposition. Gabriel could only fall silent at such synchronicity and tone. "I didn't want to mention it either," but Azazel thought, raising his gaze with great seriousness. 2,000 years is a long time for a Ddraig bearer, Brett. Back on Elysium. Issei sat on one of the many golden benches on the site while holding a very deep thought. If your previous carriers came before, why didn't you tell me about it? He asked, causing Ddraig to scoff slightly. You know well that my relationship with my previous carriers was never good. I spent much of my journey sleeping with them. It's only natural that I didn't hear about this, the dragon commented, causing Issei to lower his gaze a little more. By now, Draig's worry was through the roof. Knowing that he must sustain such a large amount of lives, he would probably die during the final battle and even die before. After all, it was still 2,000 years away. Sometimes, the blows of reality are much stronger than one expects. At least, that's what Ddraig believed. And indeed, those things troubled him. But they were on the back burner compared to his real concern. Partner Ddraig began to search for the words to lift his best friend's spirits. Ddraig, I don't want you to die. Issei spoke first, leaving no time for the dragon to respond. Ddraig could only slowly widen his eyes in complete shock. Of all things. Of all the worries. Of his possible death. Of all the burden. Was he just fixating on that one little detail? Of his death. Ddraig could only close his eyes deeply at the same time that a big smile appeared on his face. Really, you're one hell of a guy, Brat the dragon commented. Of all things, you only fixate on that. Only fixate on that? Issei asked, lowering his gaze sadly. You're like a brother to me. Of course I'm going to fixate on that. Ddraig just increased his smile even more at what he heard. Listen, you're like a brother to me too, the dragon's gaze grew very serious. But you should also think about your future. Star, seeing that Issei didn't seem very convinced about that, the dragon began to relate. Tell me, what do you think Mitsuda and Motohama would feel when they learn of your death? Issei widened his eyes slightly at the comment. What would your companions think? Ddraig narrowed his eyes slightly. What will Tiamat and Penemu think? Issei's eyes would widen even more at his last words. They would be devastated. A few seconds silence ensued until finally Issei decided to speak. I'm also not saying you only do it for Tiamat and Penemu, for them, or for us. Star Ddraig interrupted him in a rather soothing voice. You should do it for you, too. After all, wouldn't you like to enjoy hundreds of years in the vicinity of Tiamat and Penemu? Don't you mind dying sooner, knowing all that you could enjoy together with them in the future? Seeing that Issei seemed to start reacting, Ddraig couldn't help but smile. And they are just an example. You can still experience many things together with me, even together with your partners. So, will you stand idly by? Issei leaned back on the bench, looking down at his hands. A very determined look crossed his face as he clenched his fists tightly. I'll survive and I'll make sure you do too. He exclaimed with complete assurance. It doesn't matter if I have to sweat blood at every training session. That's the spirit. Ddraig roared with great conviction, seeing that Issei had completely pulled himself together. Are they ready to go back yet? The chatter was interrupted with Michael's arrival, causing Issei to look up at him. I just have one question. He commented, causing Michael to look at him with special attention. Do reincarnations apply within each faction? He asked, causing Michael to shake his head. It doesn't. All races that possess reincarnations or are half-bloods do not count within the numbers. Still, it is specified that the extermination of the demons and fallen angels happens almost entirely, so there shouldn't be more than 4 or 5 survivors, putting the two sides together, of course. Michael explained, causing Issei to lower his head. Just one last question before we go back. Star hearing the gauntlet, both Issei and Michael were surprised. If Trihixa is supposed to be the one causing the extermination, why doesn't her symbol appear in the prophecy? It's kind of curious, being that it should be the one with the greatest involvement. After all, everything ends up being triggered because of him. Well, it's the prophecy of the apocalypse. His name may not appear, but he's the dragon god of the apocalypse, and it just so happens that the seal will be broken in approximately 2,000 years. Michael clarified. All the clues indicate it's him. A small hum was heard from the gauntlet, indicating that Ddraig had been satisfied with the answer. Before we go back, I'd like you to promise one thing. Michael commented with great seriousness, receiving a nod from Issei. I want to keep this strictly between us. Very few know about it, and spreading such information to the entire supernatural world would be very dangerous. Chaos and panic could reign in different sectors if it became known. Meanwhile, back in hell again. We will take advantage of that fluctuation. The Securite is the fluctuation. Surziches commented with great seriousness. The Securite has great power in the coming war, and if we manage to use it carefully, we could survive such a catastrophe. And after the battle, Surziches would narrow his eyes with a mischievous look. We could take advantage of the weakness of the other races so that we could predominate over them and control them. Surziches fixed his gaze on Riaz with great seriousness. But all that, it's up to you, Riaz. You have to control it through love and keep it ignorant at all times. Surziches leaned back against his desk again, opting for a passive look. At the moment, you've had no progress with it. Something that's understandable due to the fact that you've had very little time with the carrier because of his training. But that's okay, let's remember that not only do we need control, but we also need him to be very strong. What if it turns out that he is not the security of the prophecy? Riaz asked, causing Serziches to lower his gaze as he made a seal appear that had the engraving of the 12 gates of hell. We would go to plan B. Serziches couldn't help but narrow his eyes at the idea. Something I wouldn't want to do. Riaz couldn't help but look at him with confusion as he didn't know what his brother was referring to. And what about the fallen angels? Akeno asked, causing Serziches to look surprised at the woman's astuteness. Gee, I didn't expect you to notice, she commented, sketching a small smile. If the security are the biggest pawn in our plan, they are the smallest. After all, they are the only race that looks a little like ours. They would be willing to do anything to fulfill their most repulsive desires. If we show them an idyllic way in which we achieve victory, they would surely join our side. That's why I called Azazel. That way, we will begin to have more and more contacts with the fallen angels. Serziches narrowed his eyes slightly, remembering the interactions he had with Azazel. Though he seems to have somewhat different ideas than I had originally thought. But it won't be anything that will cost anything to work out. With a couple of women, he'll surely be happy by now. The Mayu thought, making it clear that he knew nothing about Azazel's full rehabilitation. As of now, it's time, Riaz whispered, clenching her fist tightly. I promise not to let you down, brother. I'm glad to hear that. The Mayu commented with a smile. But remember, we still have plenty of time. Move forward carefully and don't be hasty. Riaz simply nodded at her brother's words, then disappeared in a magical circle along with her retinue. Serziches leaned back on his desk again, sketching a mischievous little smile. Having told all the pure demons and certain exceptions about the prophecy was a very good idea. Still, I don't think Michael was wrong in thinking that spreading the information could cause great chaos and panic before its time. He thought, then narrowed his eyes shrewdly. But, he doesn't remember that we demons were born out of chaos and panic. It's normal that he doesn't remember, because we've been hiding our true nature for a millennium to find an opening due to his overconfidence towards us. But a smirk appeared on the Mayu's face. I never thought I would have such an opportunity having the security on my side. At the Kuo Academy. Issei and the others had already taken their leave of the angels, leaving them alone. Issei, are you alright? Tiamat asked with genuine concern, placing a hand on his shoulder to comfort him. Issei positioned his hand over hers, giving her a smile. After absorbing that information, I just feel like training. He commented, causing Tiamat and Penemu to smile at him, looking quite relieved. I can't believe I saw Gabriel again, Azazel thought aloud, causing everyone to look at him. But Penemu's change of attitude, no wonder she's the most desired and pursued woman by everyone. Tiamat shot a glance towards her friend, sticking her tongue out at her. Apparently, those times when they were evenly matched are over. Penemu simply raised an eyebrow, indicating that she cared little for being less than Gabriel. Issei, what do you think? Azazel asked, causing Penemu to instantly fix her gaze on her pupil. Something that had no relevance in her mind became very important from one second to the next. Which of the two is prettier? Azazel issued the ultimatum. Although, the answer was already decided even before he formulated it. Penemu? He said it with complete certainty and practically to the second, causing everyone to gasp in surprise. I like her character type much better. And I think her beauty is more sporadic and special. Penemu could only blush at such words, then look away. No one could make out that small victorious smile that appeared on her face. And you say that with such confidence, Azazel patted his face with a big smile. Issei simply looked at him, not understanding why he had said something wrong. That he said something wrong in the first place. In his eyes, both Penemu and Tiamat were totally incomparable to other women. Well, Azazel broke into the mood with a loud cheer. With this wild night, the training period ends. He concluded, then sketched a somber look as he knew well that what was to come was not good at all. Especially, for a certain cadre. Issei couldn't help but look at Penemu with some pain and she shared his gaze completely. They had both spent so much time with each other, having fun, sweating, playing, chatting, and occasionally crying, that they had completely forgotten that training didn't last forever. Tiamat could only watch without saying a word as Penemu lowered her gaze slightly, while her crimson eyes gave off a rather palpable sadness in the atmosphere. Penemu Issei reached out his hand to comfort her, whereupon the cadre stopped him instantly. Issei, her rather melancholy voice caused a lump to form in his throat. Would you like to play one last game of chess with me? She concluded, raising her gaze. Issei wasn't going to deny it in any way, but those pleading eyes only made him want to rush to her and hug her tightly to comfort her. But he knew her well, and he knew she didn't like to show a lot of emotions in public. Issei held back from hugging her out of respect, only to nod firmly, causing a tiny imperceptible smile to creep across Penemu's face. Meanwhile, Tiamat seemed to have been quite satisfied with the outcome. Apparently, I'll be spared the explanation about my heat cycle for one more day. Thought the Dragoness, pleased for both of them. Azazel drew a half smile on his face, seeing that the farewell was going to be much more pleasant than he had originally thought. A few minutes later, in Grigori. A silence was palpable in the atmosphere as they were in the main hall, and as was customary, no one would be working there late at night. Although being frank, what would be unnatural is for someone to work in the first place. The chessboard made hollow sounds for every move and for every piece that was knocked down. Nothing but those emotionless sounds could be heard around as both players were in complete silence. "Checkmate," were Issei's simple words. He would be very happy to have beaten Penemu for the first time, who had played completely for real, but the situation did not allow it. Especially because of the bitter face Penemu had during the whole duel. Issei tried to start a conversation but was quickly interrupted when Penemu grabbed his hand, making eye contact for the first time with him since they arrived at Grigori. "Can you stay with me?" Penemu tightened his grip on the chestnut's hand even more. "Just for tonight, please," he concluded in a very pleading tone. A small smile appeared on the chestnut's face, seeing that Penemu had finally decided to open her emotions completely towards him at this moment. "I'd love to," Issei quickly replied, giving him a big smile. To be sure, no smile of Penemu's had ever come as close to returning to its origins as this one. Her smile was so pure and delicate, denoting all her happiness at hearing that Issei had accepted her proposal. It was such a beautiful smile that the chestnut couldn't help but file it together with the first smile Tiamat gave him when he said he would stay with her those 3 days. That's how they both went to sleep in the cadre's room. This time, Issei was not ashamed to look at her face, maybe it was because of the situation or because she was already irresistible enough in his eyes not to look at her, especially when she was wearing her white pajamas, which made her look much more beautiful than usual. Penemu didn't take a second to move closer to him, snuggling her body a bit next to the chestnut's. The distance between them was noticeable, but it was completely cut off by her large cleavage, which pressed affectionately against his chest. She clasped her hands together and rested them on Issei's chest without any words. They were both content with breathing so close to each other. And not only that, the warmth that was felt was also too pleasant to go unnoticed. "Really?" The silence was broken by a shy Penemu. "Do you really think I'm cuter than Gabriel?" Hearing the question, Issei couldn't help but laugh internally. Though that chuckle was especially due to how Penemu twisted her body underneath the blankets, indicating that she attached non-existent importance to the answer. Penemu couldn't help but tense slightly when she felt Issei's arms wrap around her waist, enclosing her in a weak embrace, but one that meant much more than that. "Why do you even care about that? You're 100 times prettier than her." Penemu felt a huge blush creep up her cheeks from the endless emotions that welled up from deep within her chest. Luckily, complete darkness was on her side so that he couldn't see her in that condition. But she couldn't help but act on such a gripping feeling. Issei could only blush slightly when he felt how the cadre used her legs to wrap around his waist. That didn't end there, as she also wrapped her arms around his chest, enclosing him in an embrace so tight and warm that one could very easily feel the other's heartbeat. Heartbeats that were perfectly in sync, as if the two were connected. "Because of your academy and my work, we won't be able to see each other. The schedule load is quite dense for each of us, especially for me," Cadre commented with quite noticeable distress, even her voice sounded a bit broken. She never thought that distancing herself from someone could become so painful. "I understand perfectly," Issei commented, not knowing what to say about it. "Don't say anything." Penemu's broken voice deepened even more. "Just." Issei couldn't help but feel his heart begin to tremble due to the fact that he felt a dampness become palpable on his shirt, indicating that Penemu had begun to cry. "Just hug me," she concluded, causing Issei to tighten his embrace on her even more, feeling tears threatening to spill from his eyes. But he wanted to feel strong for once in his life. He wanted to be strong for her. The next day. "And the dynamic brat?" Azazel asked, seeing Penemu enter the great hall, unaccompanied by Issei. "He already left," was Penemu's curt reply, sitting down next to Azazel to begin flipping through papers. "At this time in the morning?" Azazel squeaked. "He must really like the academy," he commented to no one in particular, only to feel a bit quizzical at Penemu's attitude. After all, she didn't have her usual drabness on her face, with her seriousness hiding her emotions. In fact, on this occasion, you could see for a fact that she was in pain, and a lot of it. Azazel caught on almost instantly to what was happening, so he stared at her for a couple of seconds until finally a sly smile shot from his face. "Hey. Don't talk to me now." Penemu cut him off immediately. "I'm trying to concentrate and I'm not in the mood to talk to anyone." Would you like to see Issei while you do your work in between? Enemu would have told him to shut up or she would kill him, but it was more than obvious that those words had caused the cadre great interest. Her piercing, exclusive gaze directed solely at Azazel affirmed it. Don't say anything, just hug me. Issei grimaced slightly after remembering everything that happened yesterday with Penemu. From the look on his face, it clearly bothered him that he had to stay away from her, though he couldn't live tormented by it. Issei raised his gaze, remembering from the first day he met her with that little accident when they collided, to the moments where she opened up to him and cried in his arms, narrating all her past and what she had suffered. Those thoughts ended during the fireworks, remembering her beautiful smile and the perfect contrast her beauty gave to what was happening behind her. They were vivid images of her that he could never forget. Issei's smile faltered as he realized he was already in front of Kuo Academy, slightly in awe. How long was I thinking about? Issei shook his head quickly, entering the courtyard of the institution. Tiamat smiled at him from one of the third-floor windows, giving him a small wave, which Issei quickly replied. Issei. The aforementioned averted his gaze as he heard someone shouting in the distance, watching as some sort of stampede approached him at full speed. Issei. Motohama's voice quickly cleared up, and just that quickly he also knew why his two friends were running so fast, due to the fact that a few women were chasing them with wooden katanas. The two friends quickly positioned themselves behind Issei to use him as a human shield, causing him to roll his eyes. The women slowed down right in front of him, giving him an evil glare. Are you going to defend them again, Haidu, friend of the pervert duo? Cadis asked. Issei couldn't help but make a pouty face at his nickname. We were already too benevolent last time, but they don't learn. The same woman commented, taking a firm step forward. Either get out of the way, or we'll have to beat you up too. Issei glanced at his two friends, scowling at them and causing them to smile nervously. Finally, he gave a small sigh and closed his eyes. I think we could talk about. It's impossible to talk to those beasts. Murayama shouted, trying to punch Issei in the torso to get him out of the way. Everyone was surprised, including his own friends, when Issei stopped the attack in its tracks with a single hand. Murayama tried to move the katana, but it was impossible. Issei's grip on it was too strong. Issei turned his face to look at her, opening his eyes in a somewhat weary manner. Are you going to listen to me? Murayama gritted her teeth hard, using all her strength to try to move her katana, but it was impossible for her. She finally stumbled backwards and fell, due to Issei having opened his hand. Issei looked at them all for a few short seconds, seeing that they already seemed to be a bit calmer, perhaps it was due to the fact of what they had just witnessed. It's true that your attitude is somewhat despicable, but. Why are you defending them? Cadis interrupted him again, causing Issei to look at her piercingly. Because they're my friends. He replied as if it was the most normal thing in the world, but everyone noticed that those words carried more weight than it seemed. How is it that you can be friends with the two of them? Murayama asked, rising carefully as she delivered a much more wary look to him. They're hopelessly disgusting perverts. Seeing your personality, you should be around someone like Prince Charming. Issei couldn't help but feel some revulsion at Kiba's nickname, though he was almost completely over all the women at the academy, noticing him almost. Why do you guys only notice the bad side of other people, other than your Prince Charming? Issei answered with another question, causing all the women to look at him strangely. They act like that because it's impossible for them to get a woman's attention, due to the fact that they are not pretty faces like Kiba. Outside of his perverted side, I'm sure he'd be better than all of you. Are you implying that a couple of perverts are better than us? Cadis asked, unable to believe what she was hearing. Old people have their good side, just like the bad side. Issei paused for a second, looking her over from head to toe. For example, are you going to tell me that it's not wrong to want to beat an innocent person to a pulp just because he gets in the way? And what about me, if I saw you guys beating the shit out of two people just for mere pleasure? Do you think I wouldn't think you were violent crazy fucks? All the women lowered their gaze somewhat barely at what they heard. Why don't you ask them the reason for their actions, now that you have them in front of you? Issei looked at his two friends with a small smile. Talking to them and understanding them will make things better. Issei earnestly lightened his gaze slightly. In the meantime, you guys should try to restrain those urges of yours a little. I understand that they want to be with a woman, believe me. But it's no excuse to act that way. And if you keep doing it, there might come a time when some woman will take advantage of you for it. Issei clenched his fist slightly at the memory of Rainer. This I tell you for your own good. He said to both friends, causing Mitsuda and Motohama to look at each other in shock. So are you insinuating that either of us would fall in love with either of them if we understood them better? Murayama asked, clearly not believing what he was saying. Well, they say that in love, the people who are the most different are the ones who end up loving each other the most. Or killing. Issei commented rather amusedly, then looking at Mitsuda and Motohama. Just the same, you two may not be as different as you think, Murayama. Issei bowed his shoulders. Who knows? Addis and Murayama looked at each other, then nodded. Very well. We'll try to understand them, I think Caddis commented, clearly not very convinced of the idea. The two women leading the angry mob looked at the perverts for a short second, then walked away. Issei turned around as Motohama tugged at his shirt. Since when did you become so wise? He asked, adjusting his glasses. Well, let's just say my thoughts became a little clearer thanks to Issei's look would immediately decline, making Mitsuda and Motohama look somewhat worried. A friend? A friend? Mitsuda asked. Did something happen on the trip with your club? Surprisingly, Mitsuda overlooked the fact that Issei was seeing a woman. Something like that, Issei commented, rubbing his hair. We had a woman about 25 years old who was our guide, so to speak. She and I became good friends. Issei's smile faded again. But, I'm afraid it will be very difficult to see her again. I see, I'm sorry to hear that. Motohama commented with some regret, then adjusted his glasses. Forgive me for asking, but was that woman you speak of attractive? Issei couldn't help but smile at the question, as they had taken so long to ask it. Yes, and very much so, he answered him, starting to walk into the academy. Hearing this, both friends instantly jumped on him. So how much? Mitsuda asked with great excitement. I'd say it's on Tiamat's level. Issei replied, causing both friends to let out a big "oh" from their lips in response. Really, they both shouted, unable to believe it. In the living room. Issei was looking at the window, watching the clouds pass by. The first class had been very boring, where they only informed him that next week was going to be the parents' visit and that from now on some schedules changed due to the change of a teacher. They also talked about certain things about the swimming pool, something he did not understand, or rather, he did not want to understand due to his ramblings. Well, it was understandable that he was distracted after everything that had happened to him the day before. The door knocked, causing a rather intense silence to come into the room, something Issei hadn't picked up on due to his deep thoughts. The sound of chalk on the blackboard was all that could be heard for a short second. I will be your new civics instruction teacher. Hearing the woman's voice, Issei couldn't help but widen his eyes in great shock, only to witness Penemu standing there, wearing the secretary's dress he had met her in. She shook her hair with her hand, giving her beautiful figure an even more beautiful touch. My name is Penemu Labrega. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I hope we get along well. The woman clarified, diverting her gaze on Issei for a short second, something Mitsuda caught instantly. You've met this cutie before? He asked, whispering to her from behind his back. She's the woman who acted as a guide on my journey. Issei answered him, causing Mitsuda's pen to drop to the floor at the response. He could only think how Issei's bastard could be so lucky. Issei could only look at the woman intently, then rubbed his eyes. Is this real? He wondered, looking intently at the woman in front of him. First Tiamat, and now her rather discreet smile came across his face. This couldn't be better. Minutes passed, Penemu was taking care of leaving different instructions to her students while she seemed to be signing papers non-stop and reading different documents. Issei had thought that she managed to come here thanks to the fact that she could work at the same time she was teaching classes. Obviously, that only made her an even more amazing woman. After all, not many people could do both at the same time. Near the end of the hour, she put on her glasses, giving Issei to understand that this wasn't the first hour she had put into work and she had already been doing it for quite a while. She had probably already started before she came to the academy. Finally, the bell rang, signaling the break. Mitsuda and Motohama stayed talking to Issei for a few minutes for different plans for the afternoon, then left to go shopping. Issei looked out the window with great tranquility. He was all alone in the classroom. Issei couldn't help but smile when he saw how Murayama intervened Mitsuda and they both sat down on a bench and started chatting. While Motohama sat down next to Aika, seeing that she was eating alone. That made him think that his words had not only affected the ladies, but his own friends as well. So here you were. Issei turned around to see Tiamat and Penemu enter the hall. Issei just smiled brightly and quickly got up from his seat, giving Penemu a big hug who responded with the same intensity and affection. I had wanted to do this for the whole hour, but it would have been so weird. Issei just laughed at his own words. Believe me, I wanted to do it too. Penemu replied, hugging him tighter. What about your birthday? Tiamat asked, sitting down on top of a desk. Issei broke away from Penemu, giving the Dragoness a smile. We've already been planning with Mitsuda and Motohama. I also plan to invite Tannen. After all, we've formed a friendship of sorts in our time together. Tiamat nodded in agreement. Would it be too much trouble if I participated as well? The three turned their gaze to see how Azazel was leaning against the doorframe, folding his arms while holding that mysterious smile on his face. I don't see how it's a bother, was Issei's simple reply. Very well. Azazel simply nodded in satisfaction, then gestured with his head. I need you to come with me, I need to give you something. The leader fixed his gaze on the cadre. You too, Penemu. The aforementioned looked at each other, then at the dragoness, who simply bowed her shoulders. At the club of the occult. Whoa. Issei couldn't help but be surprised when he saw a motorcycle leaning against the wall of the old building. It was quite large and had a cool design. Penemu approached and couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at what she witnessed. You bought yourself a motorcycle? The fallen asked, looking at her leader. It's not mine. Azazel stated, then pulled a key out of his pocket. Hatch. Issei turned around quickly, catching the keys. He could only look at him with great confusion at the act. It's yours. Azazel declared, causing Issei to blink in great surprise. Happy birthday. He concluded, sketching a somewhat mischievous smile. Wait, I can't accept this. Issei exclaimed, unable to believe what he had heard. I'm giving it to you not only for your birthday, but also for all the trouble Kakabiel caused back then. Azazel explained with some seriousness, indicating that he wouldn't take no for an answer. Issei sat on the motorcycle, looking at her carefully. I don't know what to say, just thank you, really. She concluded, handing the man a grateful smile. Stop it, you're gonna make me cry, you dynamic brat. Issei couldn't help but roll his eyes at the nickname. Today is Friday. It would be nice if you took the opportunity to take a little trip so you could take your mind off of everything, in general. You know, Azazel commented, causing Issei to nod in understanding. In addition to that, I also have a gift for you, Penemu. Hearing her name, Penemu couldn't help but point to herself. For me? She asked, incredulous. I know you've been working forever and because of us, you never had a vacation of even just one day. A small smile appeared on Azazel's face. I'll take over tomorrow's chores so you can spend some time with Issei and also distract yourself from your responsibilities. Azazel bowed his shoulders, closing his eyes. But don't get used to it because I'll never do it again in my life. The fallen one commented, causing a small smile to appear on the woman's face. She wasn't quite sure if she could trust him when it came to talk of work, but it was quite clear to her that he was serious when she heard his last words. Wait a minute, they both looked at Issei, who seemed to be in great doubt. I don't even know how to ride a motorcycle. Azazel removed an envelope from his pocket and tossed it to him. Here is a map to the nearest beach and the best hotel in the area. I'm also handing you a check for 100,000 yen so you can pay for expenses. Okay, what? Issei's eyes almost popped out of their sockets upon hearing the exorbitant figure. Even if it's a 5-star hotel, the expenses wouldn't even exceed 20,000 yen. Are you crazy, he exclaimed, in disbelief. Let's just say that whatever you have left over, it's the second part of the gift for your birthday and for saving Kuo. Azazel commented rather amusedly after seeing Issei's reaction, since for him, 100,000 yen was nothing. Take advantage of the money to buy yourself new clothes. You always wear the academy's clothes, even when you train. In fact, I'm sure you must not have many spares left by now. Azazel explained with a serious look. He had been to Issei's home earlier to take his photo album and remembered getting an unpleasant surprise when his parents wouldn't even buy him clothes. Very well, thank you very much. But Issei looked at him while sweating slightly. You still didn't tell me how I should learn to drive in a day. Azazel simply turned away, opting for a nonchalant look. You'll just be learning on the road. He said matter-of-factly, then held up his hand, waving goodbye. This guy, Issei thought. Always so nonchalant about everything. Penemu completed the thought of her future lover. A few hours later. Finally, Issei had been able to celebrate his long-awaited birthday. There were Mitsuda, Motohama, Penemu, Tiamat, Tannen and Azazel. Issei had a great time together with his soul friends, having fun with them, telling different stories and laughing with joy. Incredibly, the one who participated the most in all this was Azazel, telling about his different journeys across the planet. Something that interested Mitsuda and Motohama very much when he talked about the appearances of foreign women and dates that led to spicy things sometimes. Finally, Issei sat down at the small picnic and couldn't help but smile at how Tiamat was doing her best to keep Penemu from burning the meat. They both looked quite happy, so it was quite a refreshing blow to his soul because of all that those two beautiful women had suffered in the past. To see them smiling and laughing, it was something simply irreplaceable. Do you always celebrate birthdays in this park? Azazel asked, sitting down next to him. Always since I met Mitsuda and Motohama. It's kind of like a tradition. Issei replied with a toothy grin. Azazel just rested a hand on his shoulder, indicating that he was happy to see him so happy. Be careful with the embers. Tiamat arranged a piece of meat that could have been roasted by Penemu, making them both laugh. Hearing the beautiful melodies they made with their laughter, Issei couldn't help but look at them again. Azazel was no fool, so he caught his gaze instantly. What do you think of them? He asked. The question caught the young man a little off guard. What do I think of them? Issei looked for a few more seconds at the Dragoness and the Fallen, how they played and how they teased each other. I owe them both everything I am. He replied, taking Azazel a bit by surprise. Is that answer enough? He asked, sketching a rather sincere smile at him. Although you surprised me with the answer, I didn't exactly mean it. Azazel replied, then resting his hand on top of Issei's head. I meant what you think of them, not as a person, not as what they mean to you. Azazel stared at him, narrowing his eyes slightly. I mean how you see them as a woman. Issei just chuckled lightly at the question. Well, I'm not stupid. He replied, then stared at them. Tiamat has breasts that surpass Akeno's without much difficulty, and she has a trained and chiseled figure. She has hair, a face, and eyes that are simply perfect. Her legs are also perfect thanks to her physical figure. And yet, what stands out the most about her body is her butt. Issei turned his gaze, looking at Penemu. Penemu's case is exactly the same, though instead of her butt being what stands out the most, it's her breasts. Issei frowned slightly. Still, it's not the most attractive thing I see on them, I just don't know what it is that makes me see them as wonderful women, but I know there's something there. Issei gave a small sigh, lifting his hair. I'm still trying to figure it out. A mysterious look graced Azazel's face. Sure, it's pretty obvious what you mentioned. He thought. After all, any man would feel an attraction to two women who have a perfect face and body. Anyone could feel attracted, but not in love, he concluded, then smiled. I hope you find out soon. He said to Issei, ruffling his hair. Let's get our picture taken. Shouted Tannen happily, quickly running next to Mitsuda and Motohama where Issei was to get in the picture. After hearing the shout, Tiamat and Penemu quickly joined them. Finally, the photo made a small flash, which after a few seconds revealed itself in a beautiful image. There was Azazel next to Issei, still stroking his unruly hair with a half smile, while Mitsuda and Motohama came out lying in the front, probably because they barely made it in time, while Tannen was sitting next to Issei, while hugging him tightly by the neck with a toothy smile on his face. Behind the Compleon were the Dragoness and the Fallen kneeling, where Tiamat was smiling, completely delighted to have a piece of meat sticking out of her mouth, while Penemu seemed to be threatening her with her hand to take it away. Finally, a book could be seen to close, seeing that it was Issei who had placed the picture in his album. He simply smiled for a short second, then set the memory center down on the shelf after hearing the door open. Tiamat practically jumped on top of him, her hair completely wet and in her underwear, indicating that she had recently bathed. It's been a long time since I slept with you. The Dragoness commented, then sat down to straddle him, smiling a rather mischievous smile as she wiggled her fingers in a strange way. I really missed it. Issei could only laugh loudly as the tickle attack landed on his body again. Still, he was quite skilled and responded quickly, causing them both to laugh non-stop for several minutes, rolling around on the bed and spinning, messing it up completely. Finally, they both seemed to have relaxed again, where everything ended as it had started. Tiamat sitting on Issei's waist. They were both breathing a little shakily. Issei couldn't help but feel a little tingle as a drop of Tiamat's wet hair fell onto her exposed abdomen. He didn't know how or when it had happened, but the Dragoness had removed his shirt at some point during the fight. I think we'd better go to sleep. I have to get up pretty early tomorrow. Issei commented. He positioned his firm hands on Tiamat's hips to move her. The Dragoness suffered a small spasm in her whole body after feeling the touch so warm and delicate, something Issei didn't pass unnoticed. Are you okay? He asked her with genuine concern. At this, Tiamat couldn't help but turn serious. We need to talk about something very important. The Dragoness cautiously pulled Issei's hands away, then glared at him. It's a bit embarrassing, but Tiamat's seriousness didn't hold out much longer as her gaze twisted to a much more coy one as a rather large blush appeared on her face. All Dragonesses have a. Issei couldn't help but file Tiamat's attitude away in his fondest memories as he had never seen her act like this, and she looked quite cute. You'll see. Tiamat gave a small sigh, then laid her body down and settled on her beloved's chest. All Dragonesses have a period where they become very sensitive, so to speak. The Dragoness simply closed her eyes with great satisfaction as she felt Issei stroking her hair. I'm talking about mating season. Mating season? Issei's eyes slowly widened. Wait a minute, are you telling me that you? Yes, I'm going through that period. The Dragoness clung even tighter to Issei after her last words. In the mating season, there are times when the reproductive instinct clouds the Dragoness's judgment and mind, pouncing on the first man who crosses her path. Ddraig thought internally, listening to the chatter. He was having quite a bit of fun with this, as he could feel Tiamat's sexual appetite increasing with each passing second. And on top of that, he was getting a kick out of her lying. Tiamat felt the hand that was stroking her hair embrace her protectively, causing a sweet smile to creep onto her face. Calm down, Issei. I am the strongest dragon queen. My mating season isn't strong enough to completely cloud my judgment. The dragoness explained, causing Issei's embrace to visibly relax. Still, I'm worried. I can control myself, but not all the time. There will be times when I can't hold myself anymore, and I'm sure that 100% of those times, you'll be near me. After all, we sleep in the same bed. Tiamat raised her gaze, her cold blue eyes shining brightly. When that happens, you have to go. Couldn't I help you in some way? He asked, looking stricken by the condition of his master and future lover. Of course. A rather seductive smile came across the dragoness's face. If you don't mind being raped. Issei just sweated the last words. The hours passed, and Issei had managed to sleep without much trouble. Tiamat had also found herself very comfortable sleeping on her beloved's body, feeling his heartbeat. In fact, perhaps she had become more comfortable than she should have. The dragoness's eyes glowed brightly in the darkness when they opened. Her gaze became somewhat devious as she began to rub her thighs a bit. Do you enjoy your stay? The dragon's comment came out through his bearer's hand with a distinctly mocking tone. What do you want? The dragoness asked, frowning. You can deceive the brat, but not me. I know very well that dragons only enter their rutting period for one man only, and they focus on having carnal relations only with that man, the dragon declared smugly. Have you already forgotten that I'm a dragon too? If you say anything to him, I swear I'll find a way into your filthy gauntlet to castrate you. Tiamat's dark tone made Ddraig chuckle. Disregard, this is a matter between the two of you, and is none of my business, the dragon explained, then quirked a mischievous grin. You know what? I was almost certain that you had fallen in love with him, but now I have no more doubts. You've even managed to awaken your reproductive instinct, even though you're not even in a loving relationship with him, the dragon commented with a rather mocking tone, making the dragon slightly clench her teeth. I'm crazy in love with him. I love him with all my being. Tiamat sharpened her gaze, indicating danger. Do you have a problem with that, underdeveloped lizard? I never said that, Dragon is hopelessly in love. Ddraig couldn't help but laugh again when Tiamat gave a small snort before looking away, indicating her annoyance. He'd found a way to annoy her, and damn, he was sure going to take advantage of her for all the times she teased him by calling him by that insulting name. In the morning. Issei woke up and gave a big yawn full of drowsiness. The young man couldn't help but rub his eyes in an attempt to shake off the sleepiness. He quickly realized that his pretty dragon was no longer there, something he found strange. After all, she loved to sleep, and even more so if she was with him. Issei slid his hand underneath the sheets to pull them off, only to hear a somewhat strange sound. Huh? Issei wondered, then raised his hand, seeing a substance of dubious provenance covering his hand. It didn't take her long to realize what it was, due to the fact that when she spread her fingers apart, the liquid slid off in a somewhat strange manner, in addition to its somewhat slimy texture. Issei blushed, not because of the fact that what was in his hand was from Tiamat's most intimate area, but because of its smell. How the hell can she smell like peppermint ice cream? He thought, then shook his head fiercely. Issei quickly got up and went to the dragoness, who was locked in the bathroom. Tiamat, are you okay? Issei knocked on the door, only to blush as he heard rather intense panting from the other side. It's just the little problem we talked about yesterday, commented the dragoness in a voice so excited and hot that it made Issei stiffen. Go now, before things get more complicated, commented the dragoness, making Issei feel a little bad. But, we'd like you to come with us. Issei almost fainted after hearing Tiamat's loud moan. Don't worry about me. I have some rather important business to attend to here. The dragoness explained, her hot tone even more raised in pitch after her last moan. Issei seemed to hesitate for a small second, but quickly agreed to her request. He slowly made his way down the stairs, only to stop when he heard Tiamat's call. When you come back, I must talk to you about something regarding your club building. She shouted with a somewhat pleading tone. It was strange, as it sounded like she was begging him to go into the bathroom and claim her right there. Still, Issei took this unnoticed, due to what the dragoness said. What's with the club? He asked, only to be shooed away when another even louder moan came from Tiamat's lips. He put on his backpack and bolted for the door, only to run into Penemu, who, apparently, was just about to ring the doorbell. She was wearing a cute tilted straw hat, while appearing to be wearing a nice loose white one-piece dress. Penemu opened her mouth to speak, but Issei quickly interrupted her. We have to go. He exclaimed somewhat aghast, jumping up and sitting down on the bike. Isn't Tiamat coming with us? She asked, sitting behind him and taking him firmly by the waist. She's very busy. Was the simple reply Issei, then starting the motorcycle and almost hitting a car in progress due to the enormous speed. A few hours later. Tiamat entered Issei's room, closing her eyes with great tranquility before the complete silence. She was in her underwear, so it was implied that she had been in the bathroom all this time. Finally, the dragoness lay down on the bed. She tucked her whole body into the sheets, making various strange movements there, only to see all her underwear fly off. The dragoness peeked half of her face above the sheet, closing her eyes deeply and inhaling as much as possible, all to catch Issei's fragrance. Now I'll be alone all day, she thought, as she let out her hidden gasps. I have to take advantage of this whole day to satiate my reproductive instinct. She put the pillow between her head and breasts, beginning to pant more agitatedly as she began to slide her hand lower and lower. This will help me, if only for several days, she concluded, then gave a small moan. She slowly pulled her hand out of the sheets, seeing that she was completely covered in her fluids. I'm already so wet, she said to herself, only to have her eyes sink in pleasure as she crushed the pillow tightly between her legs. My insides are screaming for you to make him happy, Issei. She spluttered as she bit her finger in an attempt to appease her loud moans. The bed began to squeak rather absurdly as the sheets began to flutter noticeably from Tiamat's every movement. She directed both her hands towards the pillow, pressing it tightly against her forbidden zone to feel even more pleasure. Yes. It was going to be quite a long day for her. Meanwhile, in a place a bit far away. I can't believe we didn't crash on the road even once, Penemu commented as she walked along with Issei on the shore of the beach. She still had her straw hat on, though her dress had changed to her typical white pajamas. It was only natural, due to the fact that the exaggerated measurements of her breasts always provide her with a problem when choosing clothes. It's a waste for you to go all covered up. Ddraig commented, glancing sideways at him. Issei just looked at her with a raised eyebrow. What's wrong with going like that? He asked. Issei was wearing tights, a thin leather-colored windbreaker jacket and a white shirt. The hood covered most of his hair. You've done a workout that almost killed you. Penemu explained, watching as no woman turned her gaze to Issei. You're in impressive physical shape. The only thing you're revealing are your legs, and that doesn't leave much to the imagination. I don't care about that sort of thing. Issei kicked at the sand, then handed him a smile. The truth is, I've never really stood out and I'd feel pretty strange if I started doing it now. It's just not my thing, he finished, receiving a small nod from the cadre, indicating that she understood. Still, a smile appeared on Penemu's face that only Issei could make out. At least, I think you look good like this. She commented, causing her future lover to smile at her at the praise. Look at that woman. It's true, she's beautiful. Why is she with a brat? The whispers of the nearby men caused a small twitch to appear on Penemu's brow. Right now, she wished she didn't have those supernatural hearing skills. What must he have between his pants? Surely nothing. He must not even know how to satisfy that cutie. When the brat walks away, would you be encouraged to approach her? Maybe she wants an erotic test other than with a brat who must not even know erotic play, don't you think? Those last few whispers tried Penemu's patience. Ddraig stopped dead in her tracks and shadowed her gaze. Issei watched her with slight concern. Penemu, are you alright? He asked, approaching the fallen. If it's because of what they're saying, don't worry. I totally don't care what they think. He stated, implying that he was also listening to the bullshit of the men nearby. Issei was slightly surprised as the cadre lifted her gaze and gave him a sweet smile. She stroked his cheek lovingly. Don't worry, it's alright. She commented, causing Issei to smile and proceed to drink from his bottle. Penemu's gaze shone brightly from one second to the next. I'm just fine, because I know we'll have a lot of fun playing doctor when we rent a hotel. All the men and women looked shocked at the woman's comment, while Issei spat out almost all of his drink after hearing her words. Somehow he didn't understand, Penemu seemed to have been the one affected by such words, being that the evil tongues were directed only at him. And, obviously, he was no idiot and he knew perfectly well what she meant by playing doctor. Issei quickly moved closer to his ear. Penemu, calm down. He whispered as he looked around somewhat nervously. I can't do it. Ddraig commented with a rather hard look. They're making fun of you and your manhood. I'm sure you'd be much more of a man than all of them put together, Issei. And I appreciate that you think so, I really do. Believe me, I don't care what they say. They're frustrated fuckers who haven't had a full sex life by their imaginary standards. Issei broke away from her slightly, raising both eyebrows. Do you seriously think I care what those kinds of people think? Especially if they're strangers I don't even know. Penemu looked at him intently for a short second, then sighed. Issei smiled at the thought that she had brushed it aside. Still, the cadre had to say that she resented those kinds of comments a lot, and it wasn't because he was her friend, it was because she loved him. She could put up with them thinking ill of seeing a 25-year-old woman with an 18-year-old, after all, they are mere humans. But she wasn't going to tolerate them mocking Issei. Not only because she loved him and felt that need to defend him, but also because of the fact that she had a hunch that Issei would be a monster in bed, and her hunches are always usually right, hence, she can't stand being slandered like that. It was unbelievable for her to hear how some men would make fun of Issei's manhood, being that none of them would be able to last more than an hour in action, while Issei could probably endure well, her mind wouldn't be able to figure it out exactly unless she did the test herself. Still, she knew that time would be very, very long. Her ramblings ended when she heard a comment from another man. "Hey, look." She said that very proudly just a few seconds ago, but the brat isn't even holding her hand. "He's probably afraid to touch her body," whispered another graciously. This was the last straw again for the cadre. "Hey Penemu," commented, catching Issei's attention. "Put one of your hands on my ass." Issei rolled her eyes. "Don't you think you're taking this too seriously?" Penemu tilted her head slightly, blinking once. "You think?" An almost invisible blush creased Penemu's face as she felt her waist being encircled by Issei's hand, trapping her in a warm embrace. "Is this enough?" he asked, receiving a smile from the fall. "Yes, this is more than enough," she whispered, her hands lightly squeezing her pajamas as she felt the loving gesture. Somehow she didn't understand, those whispers stopped bothering her for the whole afternoon. Several hours later, in a 5-star hotel. Issei and Penemu entered the room. It was very small, but looked very ostentatious. It had a phenomenal red design, with a large double bed. There was only a sliding door of an opaque transparency leading to a bathroom, which seemed to be almost as big as the main room. "Amazing." Issei didn't hesitate to exclaim, seeing the cool design as he put down his backpack. "It's kind of normal, coming from such an expensive hotel." Penemu clarified, not looking surprised by the design of the interior. Issei couldn't help but rub his hair with slight nervousness. "It's a pity there's only one bathroom. We're in a hotel." Penemu sat on the bed, stretching her legs. "Friends don't come here for a short stay in precisely the same room," she commented, then raised an eyebrow. "And what's wrong with there being only one bathroom?" Ddraig's question made Issei look at her with a poker face. A few minutes later. The sound of a drop falling into the tub was the only thing heard in the bathroom. Things had definitely not turned out as Penemu had hoped. She stood outside the tub, placing the shower head to the side as she watched Issei plunged into the tub, completely covered by a curtain. "Can you give me the lotion?" she asked as she fixed her hair with great subtlety. Ddraig toweled herself as she thought about the situation. "I had heard from Tiamat that they had bathed many times together, so I really thought it wouldn't be a problem," he thought, then watched as Issei's figure reached for the cream. "But I obviated the fact that Tiamat is a dragoness, and in her species, it is a natural thing to see the opposite gender naked, so it wasn't unnatural to bathe in a mixed way." Penemu was slightly surprised when a bowl nearly hit her face, catching him inches from the impact. A small smile appeared on her face as she caught and tossed the product. "I guess I should break the ice." Issei startled a little at the sound of Penemu's voice. "Issei, what you gave me, it's not lotion." "Oh, sorry." The young man peeked a bit of his face through the curtain, only to be hit hard in the face by the object that was previously in Penemu's hand. "What the?" Issei didn't finish speaking as he watched Penemu throw and catch a soap with a challenging smile on her face. A rather disturbing smile appeared on Issei's face. "So that's what you want to play at, huh?" she asked, then throwing whatever was closest to her at him. Penemu dodged it and quickly shot back at him. Laughter dazzled in the bathroom, accompanied by loud booms from the force of the objects being thrown. Soap stuck to the walls, shampoo began to stain the wet floor, and lotion stained the curtains and toilet a thick white. The pitched battle continued like this for several seconds, until in one of the many shots, Issei threw a soap with a terrible aim and hit the mirror, breaking it on the spot. The blow was such that it even cracked open by sheer inertia. Seeing this, Issei just started whistling while hiding behind the curtain, as if nothing had happened. The sound of a doorknob was picked up by Penemu's trained ears, so he quickly took off his towel and threw it into the open mirror, covering it completely. The receptionist who had greeted them entered the bathroom, looking at them with a smile. "Is everything all right? We're hearing a lot of noises." Because of the steam, the woman couldn't make out very well what had happened inside, but she was sure that Penemu was completely naked and that the young man she had entered with was behind the tub curtains, apparently with a very large erection. Sorry to disturb you." The receptionist gave a quick bow in apology before leaving. Penemu quickly grabbed another towel and put it on, only to watch as Issei removed the curtain, revealing that this supposed erection was just a large bottle. "Nice save," he exclaimed, jerking his thumb up at the fall. She mimicked Issei's gesture with a small smile, then removed the towel from the mirror. Her head bounced faintly at being struck by an object, causing her to turn her gaze to see a rather determined Issei. "What's going on?" he asked. "We're not done with the war yet." Another small smile appeared on Penemu's face after hearing his words. The people who were sharing the room next door could only listen in complete amazement as rumbling sounds were heard from the other side, followed by the laughter and voice of a woman and a man. At times, it could be discerned as saying Issei, don't make it so loud, or you'll break it. Or as next time I'll give it to you in the face, Penemu. Looks like our friends are having quite a good time, commented the man with a somewhat lustful smile, then leaping towards the half-naked woman. Let's not get left behind. Finally, minutes passed, and the bathroom was a mess. Complete silence hung over the place, where two bodies rested on the tub, apparently asleep. Both covered by towels. Penemu had her hands and face on Issei's chest as she seemed to be sleeping peacefully. The young man had his arms around the cadre's back, enclosing her in a tender embrace. His chin rested on top of Penemu's head as he accompanied her in her cute dream. The bright moon adorned the sky, ushering in a rather peaceful night. Penemu was in her pajamas, already tucked in while reading a book. Her reading was interrupted when Issei came out of the bathroom, wearing pajamas that made him look like a prisoner. You could see on his face that he was quite happy to have more freedom in his choice of how to dress. Issei sat on the edge of the bed, setting an alarm on his usual clock. Finally, he shot a glance at Penemu, who had a rather seductive look on her face. Finally, do you want to play doctor? She asked, lifting the sheets in a clear invitation. Issei's face broke out in a bright red, causing Penemu to giggle sweetly at his reaction. Don't worry. She replied quickly, hugging Issei and tossing him onto the bed. I was just kidding. She concluded. Issei just shook his head at his teacher's antics, then tucked himself in next to her. It didn't take Penemu even a second before she moved closer to him and hugged him as if he were a stuffed animal. She couldn't help but put her face on top of her beloved's chest as she gave an inaudible passionate sigh when she felt Issei's hand begin to stroke her black hair. Come to think of it, how come you know about the doctor's game? Issei asked with great intrigue. I know many more erotic games, Issei the Fallen One replied, nestling her face even more into the young man's chest. I am a fallen angel. It is in my nature to be very curious about things that are considered sins. Sex is what gets the most attention, since it's what you can get the most pleasure out of, I suppose. Numerous thumps and moans began to be heard in the next room, making Issei visibly nervous, unlike Penemu, who found this quite funny. Still, I'm not like any other fallen angel. I was able to free myself from my vices and attachments just in time before I sold my body to a total stranger for mere pleasure. That's why I'm still a virgin. Penemu raised her gaze, thinking carefully. Though, to tell the truth, sometimes my lust overpowers me a bit and I must find a way to free myself. Hearing this last part, Issei couldn't help but blush intensely as he remembered when he saw Penemu touching herself by accident. But I would never sell my body just for a little pleasure. She concluded, sitting on top of Issei's waist. Throughout my life I've had many proposals, but I'll never accept any. Penemu raised her gaze for a short second, then looked at Issei again. Well, unless it's with the man I love. I don't think it would be too hard for you to pull that off. Penemu couldn't help but be surprised at her beloved's words. Well, I mean, you're an exceptional and quite unique woman. I'm sure that at some point you'll find a man who really loves you. Issei positioned one of his hands on the cadre's cheek and she leaned into the touch without a second thought. Well, at least, I think you're as beautiful on the outside as you are on the inside. Penemu felt her burning chest transfer a myriad of pure bliss to her entire body just from listening to Issei's words. It was always so nice to be around him, she had almost forgotten what unhappiness was. Simply put, she felt so complete being by his side, she never wanted to be separated. Even, those words made her cheeks turn a rather deep red, at the same time she gave him a smile as pure as her feelings. Penemu slightly lowered her gaze, while positioning a hand over Issei's, to make sure that warmth she felt on her cheek didn't disappear. You're so sweet with your words. Really, the blush on her face was noticeably controlled, probably because of what she was about to say. But, after everything I did in my life, it's not a happiness I deserve. I don't deserve to be loved, let alone deserve to love. Issei opened his mouth to instantly contradict that, but was stopped when Penemu put one of his fingers to his lips. Anyway, I got to be happy. Something I never thought I'd feel again. Penemu brought her hand to her chest. I got a great friend in Tiamat. Besides, these last 2 months not only left me to her, you showed up too. Penemu gave him such a beautiful smile that it made Issei blush slightly. That blush intensified as Penemu laid down on his chest. Remember how you had told me earlier that I was one of the most valuable people to you? Well, the same is true for me. You're irreplaceable for everything you've done for me, for how you've helped me, for how you've listened to me, for all that, and so much more. Issei was surprised when Penemu brought her lips to his cheek, delivering a shy, leaking kiss that meant much more than it seemed. For all that, I love you very much. Penemu hugged him tightly, placing her head just below his chin. It's not the same as love, but it's a kind of happiness. A kind of happiness that fills me up completely. That's why I don't really care about love, as long as we're together, as long as we keep experiencing such fun or exciting things together with Tiamat, I'm sure I'll be happy forever. Issei was speechless at what the cadre said. He only deigned to reciprocate her embrace, making her feel even happier. The moans and thumps from the next room grew even louder, but somehow those sounds didn't reach Issei or Penemue, who fell asleep in each other's embrace, while a pure harmonious smile delighted on their faces. That was an image to think about. Such a pure love was present between the two of them that it completely overshadowed the union the people in the next room were having. They didn't need to join their bodies to make them equal, just with their pure love, it already surpassed them. That's right. The love so great and pure that Issei and Penemue didn't want to see. The next day. Penemue was sitting on the sand, inches from the water. She was enjoying the total silence, except for the sound of the waves. "How quiet it is today," Issei commented, sitting down next to her. "It's very early," was Penemue's reply, not taking her gaze away from the waves. Issei watched her face for a few seconds, seeing how such a cute smile remained on her face. This was gratifying to him, though he couldn't help but feel a little bad for her. "It's a pity we have to go back so quickly," Issei commented, mimicking Penemue's look. "Maybe," she replied. The silence graced the atmosphere for a few seconds until finally Penemue rested her head on her beloved's shoulder. "It's been a day filled with emotions and memories." She closed her eyes deeply, leaning her body against Issei's. "Thank you so much, Issei." He didn't even look at her, just continued to stare at the waves as he wrapped his hand around Penemue's waist, pulling her closer to him. "It was nothing." Thank you for watching part 10 of this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing and liking the video. I hope to see you in the next video.